upstairs. I got tulips growing. Oh, so cold there. They're the right plants.
Okay, Council, we are live, so I wanted to welcome everyone tonight. I want to start by thanking our broadcast partners in the media who report on our meetings. Before we get going, we are expecting another significant storm event, so I wanted to have our Deputy CEO of Public Works briefly give him an opportunity to speak and give everybody some insight and maybe have some suggestions. So we can pass the microphone to Mr. Girardi, please.
Through you, Mr. Mayor and Council, we're expecting another 15 to 25 centimeters of snow tomorrow with 80-kilometer-an-hour winds. So this is going to make it certainly a significant event. And of course, our teams are going to be working on keeping the mains and collectors open. Some of the things that we would ask all the residents and the motorists is, first of all, to give the equipment a lot of room. We would really hope that people wouldn't park on the street even during the day through this event until we get through it. It'd certainly be appreciated, because if not, there's a potential that you could get plowed in with a fair bit of snow. Again, looking at garbage collection, last Tuesday garbage collection was canceled due to an event, and here we are again a week later on a Tuesday and another garbage day. We're hoping to get garbage day in. We're going to do our best. It might be a little bit slow going. But we hope to get the garbage picked up for the Tuesday homeowners. Other than that, we ask that you have patience, and the ends of driveways, I might as well make it public right now. We won't be going around cleaning the ends of driveways. This is snow plowing. We're not scraping. We're just keeping the ends of your ends of your driveways could have a substantial amount of snow, but I certainly don't have the equipment or the manpower to be doing that during events. So, it's pretty. I think that's pretty well all the things I wanted to bring up.
So thank you. It's been a challenging winter for your staff. I want to recognize that. Let's also point out that we've had another significant fire occurrence, and when we do, obviously our firefighters are hard at work, but Public Works staff is also on site keeping things in order and keeping the streets open and trying to keep the water off the streets and whatnot. So there's been lots of double duty and overtime at Public Works, and the guys are getting tired. So if we can all exercise some patience with them during this next winter storm event, we'd appreciate it. Mr. Clerk, if you could start the meeting. Thank you.
Mr. Mayor and members of council, we did a soft launch of electronic voting last regular meeting. We'll be doing a slightly harder launch tonight, including having it displayed on the display screen. So I do ask for your patience, and please look at your devices when we're calling for a vote to register your vote. In the event that I don't see a vote showing up on my screen from you, I will ask you what your vote is just to record it properly. Our first item is number 1, adoption of minutes, and I have a motion by Councillors Dufour and Nero. Resolve that the minutes of the regular council meeting of 2019-01-28 be approved.
All in favor? So I still need your hands. Yep. Carried. So, Mr. Clerk, would we then be waiting for each of these to show up there before we proceed?
I'm going to close the vote now. Councillors Bruni and Dufour, I think we have some connection problems, so both of you were in favor of that vote? Thank you. Under our next item, declarations of pecuniary interest.
Councillor Shoemaker.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Bylaw 2019-35. It's agenda item 11.1.5. One of the partners in that building is a client of my law firm.
Okay.
Under agenda item 4, approve agenda as presented. Resolved that the agenda for the 2019-02-11 City Council meeting as presented be approved.
All in favor? Carried.
Councillor Dufour and Bruni, so indicate we'll get your connection problem sorted out in a moment.
So we have a connection problem with Councillor Bruni and Councillor Dufour.
And under agenda item 5, proclamations, delegations, we have a proclamation for Heritage Week. As well, we have the 2018 Municipal Heritage Awards, and Kathy Fisher is here to speak to them.
Welcome to Council, Ms. Fisher.
Thank you. Good day, Mayor and Council. On behalf of the Municipal Heritage Committee and the Historic Sites Board, next week, February 18th to the 24th, is National Heritage Week. And the theme this year is the tie that binds. This past year, Sault Ste. Marie hosted the 2018 Community Heritage Conference. As part of that conference, a series of panels were created to display which shared the history of Sault Ste. Marie. The panels are going to be on display during Heritage Week here at City Hall, Northern Community Center, Heritage Discovery Center, and the James L. McIntyre Centennial Library. As well, these panels are now available on the city website in the local history section. The National Trust of Canada challenges us to experience places that tell our stories, to visit and discover great buildings, extraordinary landscapes, and vibrant urban districts. We know historic places are the cornerstone of a vibrant and sustainable future. To coincide with Heritage Week, we are here also for the 2018 Heritage Awards. The Municipal Heritage Award is offered annually by the City of Sault Ste. Marie upon recommendation of the Sault Ste. Marie Municipal Heritage Committee to recognize contributions to preservation, restoration, and enhancement of the city's heritage resources. This year, we are very happy to be honoring 3 individuals. The first 2, Jean-Marie Wissel and Christian Van. Jean-Marie and Christine are dedicated their efforts in enhancing the cultural history of French-Canadian community, Métis Nation, and are true friends to Fort St. Joseph and the Ermatinger-Clergue National Historic Site. This husband and wife team are both members of the executive of CEFA, assisting in ensuring French language education is available in our community. As bilingual interpreters, they assist us in offering French language services at the Ermatinger site. As members of the executive of our Friends of the Ermatinger-Clergue National Historic Site, they are assisting in preserving and interpreting one of the founding establishments of our community. For many years now, they both have been participating regularly as volunteers and reenactors at events to assist us in bringing history to life. Their work reaches beyond the Ermatinger site as they both are involved in the history of the St. Ignace Parish and are assisting in preserving one of our parishes in our community. We are pleased to honor these 2 individuals for their efforts in enhancing our cultural community. And by the way, it's Jean-Marie's birthday today.
Hey.
The third recipient, Chris Tousle. Chris has been an advocate and a leader in the preservation and conservation of built heritage in the city of Sault Ste. Marie for approximately 38 years. I'd like to call upon Joanne Demansky to come up and say a few words.
Thank you, Kathy. It's my pleasure. It's my privilege this evening to represent the Municipal Heritage Committee as we present this year's annual Heritage Award. But it's also an even greater pleasure to introduce this year's recipient, well-known local architect, unfortunately now retired, Mr. Christopher Tousle. I've been fortunate to know Chris for a number of years as a friend, a neighbor at one time, an all-round good man, and one who shares a mutual regard for the preservation of our history and our heritage. As we've just been shown, the list of his accomplishments are many, and the list is very long. It's too long for me to go through them all, but his work can be seen throughout the city. And it spans a number of years since making his home here in 1968. He first worked with the architectural firm of Bill Burgoyne before forming a partnership with engineer Bruce Cahill. And together they earned a very fine reputation for creative architectural design and thorough oversight. Chris brought to the Sioux not just his professional skill and qualifications, but more importantly, he brought a genuine interest in the preservation of our long and unique history here as it unfolded along the shores of the St. Mary's. This was coupled with a strong desire to see that our story wasn't lost to time and obscurity. This passion for heritage preservation wasn't lost on other community heritage advocates, and in 1980 he joined members of the Sault Ste. Marie Historical Society, including Perry Short and my own father, Bert Chambers, to assist the city in forming the original Local Architectural Conservation Advisory Committee, more easily remembered as LACAC. This group was the precursor of our current Municipal Heritage Committee, and Chris was no doubt the driving force in the research, evaluation, and prioritization of our built heritage. He took this responsibility very seriously. Over the years, Chris has competently reported to and advised the city on the important designation process which preserves those properties of historic and architectural significance under the Ontario Heritage Act. He has generously given his time and talent serving on various committees over the years that are devoted to this effort, such as the city's Historic Sites Board and Heritage Sault Ste. Marie. Currently, he's been very involved in a campaign to restore the remnants of the old Northwest Company lock to its original appearance. And with its story being presented on site, it will become another very interesting and valuable historic attraction in the Sioux. In addition to all of this, he has represented us at many local, regional, and provincial conferences such as the Ontario Heritage Foundation, and much of this past year, and even before, he devoted tremendous time and energy to ensuring great success as we hosted the 30th Annual Ontario Heritage Conference here in June. Chris is also a member of the Association of Preservation Technology, where his knowledge and expertise are valued and respected. So there's no doubt that the Sioux owes a real debt of gratitude for the many years of advocacy, leadership, and outstanding contribution to the preservation of our city's built heritage. And we believe that his diligent efforts and his foresight have done much to preserve the character and unique history of our city for many years to come. We can't think of anyone more deserving. So please join me as we thank Chris for the outstanding work he's done and for his many years of dedicated service on behalf of the City of Sault Ste. Marie. Thank you.
I do believe we have a proclamation and awards tonight.
Yeah, so I understood we were going to present the awards first and then do the proclamation. So maybe if we can have the first couple, Jean-Marie and Christine, if we can come up here.
And Your Honor, I think Chris would like to say a few words after too.
Sure, absolutely. I feel like we should sing them happy birthday. Happy birthday to you. Congratulations. We'll have Mr. Tousle, Chris, and you can come up now, and then, when's your birthday, Chris? Thank you, Chris, for all their hard work. Appreciate everything you've done. Get in here between the two of us, and we'll hold that there. Oh, no, actually, it's best if you go to the microphone. So, yeah, you can go back up that way, because then everybody at home will really hear you. Yeah, so Chris, it's, if you're at the mic, everybody at home could hear you. So,
Mr. Mayor and members of council, thank you very much indeed. Very much appreciated. I kind of think, how do you summarize heritage conservation? And what I think it really is we inherit from our grandfathers, our great-grandfathers, some really good buildings. And I do see it as our responsibility to act as stewards for these buildings so that in turn they can be maintained for future generations. And I would, if I might, mention 4 buildings to you.
Sure.
The first would be the old general office at St. Mary's Paper, now the Algoma Conservatory of Music. And you can couple that, in a sense, with the machine shop, which is adjacent. And both those buildings have been repurposed for new use. And they've done, the 2 respective owners have done really excellent jobs on them. And those 2 buildings we should be really proud of. But west of the machine shop, there is the old sulfite plant. And that building, which is incidentally on the National Trust's list of buildings in distress across the country, I think it's one of 10, is really starting to suffer. And it would be just wonderful if a new use or repurpose could be found for that building before it's too late. And the last one is the one that I think you all know very well, which is the old Canoe Lock. And I just want to re-emphasize with that here we are, that's 1793, it was constructed. It lasted until the War of 1812, when it was largely filled in, partially destroyed by our friends from across the river. It was then re-excavated in the 1880s by Judge Steer from Sioux, Michigan. And then Francis H. Clerg took an interest in it in the 1895, 1896, dug it back out again and put on his own little interpretation of what it should look like. The Municipal Heritage Committee has done drawings for the revival of that lock, and it is possible, but I do see it as being one of the city's most significant historical, you can call it a structure, that could be reworked to display both the way it was built originally and the way that Clerg reinterpreted. That's it. Thank you very much.
So, Chris, thank you for all the work you have been doing. Thank you for all the work that you do to support heritage and culture. I think the project at the old Canoe Lock is a tremendous project, and hopefully we can support it as we move forward. Councillor Shoemaker asked for a moment to say a few words, so I'm going to allow him to do that.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I had the pleasure of serving on the Municipal Heritage Committee with Chris for a number of years, early last term, and can attest, as he's very convincing, as he was just now with his discussion of the old lock. He was really, I don't think he was the chair when I was there, but he was really the person everybody looked to on the committee to guide our discussions. So it was whenever there was a site of historic significance, Chris knew every detail about the site and was really a leader on the committee, whether or not in a leadership role, in name or not. So thank Chris for all his contributions to the committee and all his contributions to the community over a number of years of serving in various roles. So well deserved.
Thank you. Ms. Fisher, are you waiting for the proclamation?
Yeah.
Okay. Whereas since 1974, the National Trust of Canada designates the third week in February each year as Heritage Week. And whereas the theme of Heritage Week 2019 is the tie that binds. And whereas Heritage Week provides an opportunity to celebrate heritage in all of its forms, cultural and natural, architectural, archaeological, and collections, its diverse traditions and cultural expressions. Whereas the heritage we have inherited from our ancestors plays a vital role in providing unique identity, and this heritage provides us with a legacy to be handed down for the benefit and enjoyment of future generations. And whereas Heritage Week provides an opportunity for individuals and communities to reflect on their contributions to Ontario and how they might shape the future, and Sault Ste. Marie wishes to remember those who have helped shape our identity and who have forged a place in the history of our community. Now therefore, I, Christian Provenzano, as Mayor of the City of Sault Ste. Marie, do hereby proclaim the week of February 8th to February 24th, 2019 as National Heritage Week in the City of Sault Ste. Marie. Thank you, everybody. Appreciate that.
Mr. Mayor and members of council, under agenda item 5.3, annual report of the Integrity Commissioner. The substantive report is found under agenda item 7.1.1. Antoinette Blunt of Ironside Consulting Services is present. She will give a short presentation on the role of the Integrity Commissioner and be here to answer any questions you may have on the annual report. The annual report is appended, and it does have some recommendations for amendments to the complaint protocol.
Thank you. Good evening, Mr. Mayor, members of council, members of the public. Thank you for having me here this evening. I have a very brief presentation that just gives you a really good overview of what the role of the Integrity Commissioner is. So I'd like to go through that to start. First of all, the term, I was appointed by council May 1st, 2018, and the term goes until December 31st, 2020. The services of the Integrity Commissioner have been defined by council in a process document, an appendix with forms for any individual who is alleging a violation of the Code of Conduct, but it's also defined and established in the changes that have been made to the Municipal Act. So both written and oral advice can be given. This is for the interpretation of appropriate application of the Code of Conduct by members of council and members of boards appointed by council. Under this process, I can conduct inquiries or investigations as to whether or not there have been any contraventions of the code, and also attempt to settle any issues prior to formal investigation process. So the informal complaint process is very important. Certainly it's written in the process and recommended that if anyone witnesses any behavior or activity by a member of council or local board that is prohibited behavior, conduct, or potential violation of the code, we ask that people try and resolve those issues informally at first. This is a means to try and resolve matters before they become full-blown complaints. It is not a formal process, and it certainly is not a precondition or a prerequisite to a formal complaint, but something that we believe will try and resolve matters at a very early stage. If there is a formal complaint, the complainant is to submit that to the City Clerk's Department, and it's sworn before a Commissioner of Oaths. The clerk forwards that to the Integrity Commissioner. One of the issues that I want to point out that we feel is very important for appropriate investigation, even at an early stage, is if there are any documents or records, materials that could be evidence to substantiate a complaint, that information should be submitted at the time the complaint is submitted. In addition, the complainant should also be identifying potential witnesses to an incident. Okay. So if there is a procedure under other legislation or with policy of the city to deal with a complaint, then it is not within the Integrity Commissioner's jurisdiction. So in other words, if there's complaints that fall under the Human Rights Code, anything that's an allegation of criminal activity, the Municipal Conflict of Interest Act, the Municipal Elections Act, complaints provisions in the workplace violence and harassment prevention policies, those would all be dealt with under other avenues. So that would be the first item that I would consider, is whether or not that complaint is within the jurisdiction of the Integrity Commissioner before proceeding any further. Once the complaint is determined to be within jurisdiction, then the next thing is to review it in a preliminary matter and provide a report to Council with an estimated cost of the inquiry and the time to complete the inquiry, and if appropriate, recommendations to report if it's going to another avenue, such as reporting criminal activities to the police. That would be identified at that point in time. Other roles and responsibilities of an Integrity Commissioner is to provide advice, and all that advice that's provided is confirmed in writing. All inquiries are to be completed fairly and complaints treated as confidential as much as possible in accordance with the Municipal Act. Records are kept confidential with limited access to city staff on a need-to-know basis. It's important to ensure that looking into any complaint that's come forward be done in a prompt manner, and that results of those investigations are reported at an open meeting of Council. It's the role of Council to determine the action based on the findings in a report. There's a number of penalties that can be considered by Council depending on the outcome of the report. It could be a reprimand, a suspension of remuneration for up to 90 days as defined in the Municipal Act, requests that someone return a gift or a benefit or repay a benefit. Council has the right to remove a member from a committee or a local board appointment, request an apology, or withhold confidential information for a period of time. But those sanctions are identified and are at the discretion of Council. Anyone who files a complaint is not subject to penalty or retaliation if the complaint is made in good faith and the complainant has a reasonable opinion that the code has been violated. So the changes to the Municipal Act are coming into effect March 1st, 2019, and it already defines what the city has had in place in its process for a little over a year now. The municipality has established the code, and you can see from the annual report that I've provided with respect to filing a complaint, there are some editorial changes and one that's a little bit more substantive just to ensure clarity in the process. Okay. So the Integrity Commissioner is also a role that functions independently within those parameters as well. And then what I'd like to do is just go over some really proactive and preventative measures. All members of Council know that your role is to serve constituents in a conscientious and diligent manner, to perform your role with integrity, avoid improper use of influence, conflicts of interest, both real and apparent, to perform duties in such a manner that it promotes confidence by members of the public, and to serve the public by upholding the letter and spirit of the law and policies. That is your role. You're all very well aware of that. Also, to seek information. So if you have any issues or questions with respect to the code, certainly seek information on that, to review it, understand the complaints protocol, and to govern in a manner such that your word is your bond, that you do what you say you're going to do, that you treat people with dignity and respect, even if you don't know them and even if you don't agree with them. So that's just a little quote at the end there. And I just like to ask you right now if anyone has any questions.
Councillor Christian has a question, yep.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I have one question. But before I do, I want to thank you for your presentation. I certainly want to thank you for the work you're doing. I think the role is very, very important. I think it provides a lot of confidence to the public, and I think it also, in an indirect way, allows this council, or provides this council with more credibility in the public eye, because we are held accountable. So I appreciate that. My question is pretty basic. I read through all the documentation you provided, but I'm in the report, the annual report. Page 4 of 7, you have some recommendations, amendments, and point 2 says to review the code of conduct to ensure its accurately reflects best practice for the conduct of members of council. My question is there a formal process that you follow there? What's the mechanism for determining best practices in this regard? Are you directed by a higher body, or is this, how do you determine best practice?
It's a very good question. It is determined, I believe, by best looking at other codes of conduct throughout Ontario. If we see any other language or phrases that might support performing your role in a respectful manner. So part of my role is to review other codes and to bring forward to you any information or any recommendations to continue to keep your code of conduct updated. I think what will be supportive to me in that role is that there is a process I understand right now going on where they're trying to get together a committee or an association of integrity commissioners in Ontario, and I'll certainly be joining that. I think it'll be a great learning experience. Will also provide me with the opportunity to bring forward issues and to bring back best practices approaches to this municipality.
Thank you. I'm glad you said that, because to me that just makes sense that that there should be some kind of formalized process whereby these things could be reviewed, because it should be consistent, and the best way to do that is to have input from as many people as possible. And then I guess at that point, my follow-up question would be, I guess at that point then is it any changes to the code of conduct, how would that be communicated to UC? Is that something that happens immediately, or is that something that's done on a yearly basis?
The review of all of the processes and the code is done on an annual basis. Of course, if there's something that occurs in between the annual reports that requires immediate attention, I would develop another report and bring it to the attention of council.
Thank you very much. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Councillor Dufour.
Yes, thank you. How would local boards go about the process of obtaining some of your training on this code of conduct?
I think they just need to ask.
We'll direct that to the clerk.
Through you, Mr. Mayor, to Councillor Dufour, yes, they would just make the request to the clerk's department and we would arrange it.
Okay. Would we ever consider making some of this training mandatory for intake process as we appoint board members to our local boards and committees?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, to Councillor Dufour, certainly we're making all of our local boards and committees aware that they fall under this code of conduct. And we are, every time we start off a new term, we deal with the boards and committees, not only for items like this, but also for meeting procedure and training the different boards. Sometimes it isn't as necessary if there's been a lot of board members who are continuing on in a process, but we do pick and choose them, and we do try and get out to all of them.
Excellent. Thank you very much.
Any other questions for the Integrity Commissioner Council? Seeing none, thank you very much for your presentation
Thank you.
and your work.
Mr. Mayor, members of the council, I have a motion by Councillors Dufour and Nero, resolved that the annual report of the Integrity Commissioner be received and the recommended amendments to the complaint protocol for the Code of Conduct, council and local boards be approved.
All in favor? Motion is carried. we have Councillor, nope. Okay, everybody got in that time.
And Mr. Mayor, members of council, we can now go to the consent agenda.
You didn't vote, Councillor Christian? I think it showed you as voting in favor.
Look, no hands.
We did have a little blip, and don't worry about it right now.
Okay. Okay, so we're on the consent agenda, council. Any matters in the consent agenda? Councillor Shoemaker.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. 6.4, amendment to applicable parking bylaw fines.
Sure, go ahead.
Through you to the city solicitor. Madam City Solicitor, after reviewing a number of comparators, I guess, would it be your professional opinion that these practices or these fine amounts are in line with what we see across the province?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, to Councillor Shoemaker. The fine structures at Schedule A for that bylaw will give you a good comparator of the different cities that are not exactly the same size as ours, but there's some that are comparable, and you'll see the fine comparisons there. So our fines were significantly less in some areas, and that's why they've been looked at for an increase. So.
Okay, perfect. Yes, thank you. I had seen that. Was just sort of getting your thoughts on you know, I guess your opinion that we are in fact bringing them up to sort of an average or a comparable across various different sides of cities.
Yes, that would be correct.
Okay, and so we're to use perhaps a different term. We're implementing a bit of a best practice here in the Soo.
Through you, Mr. Mayor, to Councillor Shoemaker, I would suggest that is a best practice. We're comparable as well. Some of the fines that are spoken about, it would be, as they are currently now, it's less money to pay the fine than it is to pay for the parking. So it makes sense to bring it up to a level where we want people to actually pay for parking.
Okay, thank you. Those are all my questions.
Councillor Bruni.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Just a simple question to Ms. Fields. When was the last amendment to this?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, to Councillor Bruni, 1984 and 1989 were the last two amendments.
So you're looking at 30 years ago plus.
30 plus, yeah.
30 plus.
To 35.
Yeah. Okay, thank you.
Councillor Gardy.
Thanks, Mr. Mayor. Just one quick question to Ms. Fields, potentially, or you will direct me to the appropriate place. The free parking that we have downtown, the 2-hour limit, correct? Correct. Who can answer?
Well, there is free parking with a 2-hour limit. I think.
Okay.
Go ahead, Councillor Gardy.
My question is, at those parking lots, at each of them that where one can park for 2 hours for free, is there the opportunity or the availability to purchase at each of those sites additional parking beyond the 2 hours?
Yes.
There is?
I believe there is. I think that's a change we made within the last couple of years as a result of the parking review that Councillor Shoemaker had initiated. I think you can buy additional time if you're going to be there for more than 2 hours.
Thank you.
Councillor Nero.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. To the city solicitor, back to the last amendment times 1989, would it be our intention going forward to review these on a yearly basis every 5 years, or what would be the intention?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, to Councillor Nero, I haven't put a time line on that, but it would make sense that we don't wait for this length of time, and maybe we compare with other municipalities as they do theirs as well.
But it wouldn't be 10 years, it would be most likely less than that, correct?
Yes.
Okay, thank you. Thank you, Mr.
Any other? Councillor Hollingsworth.
Thank you. Through you, Mayor, to legal counsel, just for the viewers at home, since this is a change, can you educate us on the early voluntary payment mechanism? I think just briefly describing that for the viewers at home would be a good education piece.
Through you, Mr. Mayor, to Councillor Hollingsworth. The early resolution is something we're seeing now on a number of POA matters. And what they are trying to do is have people come in and speak with the prosecutor in advance of making any other decisions as to guilty plea or going to trial on it, to see if the matters can be resolved ahead of time. If we can have an early resolution within a certain period of time, they get a reduction in the fine amount by 1/3. So it encourages people to deal with the fines or to determine whether there is a legitimate issue to go to trial on, and then it reduces trial time so that we're not in the courtroom with a long list of matters that all resolve within, the first half hour when they could have been resolved earlier on. So it's an early mechanism, it's a mechanism to try and get the matter resolved faster, not tie up court time.
Thank you. Excellent description. Thank you.
Councillor Dufour.
Thank you. This is through you, Mr. Mayor, to Mr. Lamming. Mr. Lamming, in your professional opinion, does our current fine structure accurately capture the cost of enforcement of our parking bylaws?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, to Councillor Dufour, as my colleague has stated, we haven't had a review in 30 years, so this does not capture the enforcement cost, and so it's long overdue to make this change. And with the incentive and payment, will help collect in a more orderly fashion.
Excellent. And who currently enforces our parking bylaws outside of the hours to 9 to 4?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, to Councillor Dufour, we have our commissioners that enforce on our city streets and our downtown lots. We also have our special bylaw officers, where there's approximately 150 that are designated to specific areas throughout the community.
Okay, thank you very much.
Any other questions on that matter? Okay, any other matters in the consent agenda? Seeing none, Mr. Clerk.
Motion by Councillors Vezo, Allen, and Nero. Resolved that all items listed under 2019-02-11, Agenda Item 6, Consent Agenda, be approved as recommended.
All in favor? The motion is carried. You can cast your vote electronically. We'll see if it works this time.
Councillor Christian, are you in favor?
I'm in favor.
Okay.
Didn't come up. It didn't come up on your device, Councillor?
No, it did not.
Okay.
Mr. Mayor, members of council, that brings us to the second item on the regular agenda, and that is CAO recruitment. Report of the mayor is attached for the consideration of council.
So, council, I think the report is self-explanatory. We're all aware that Mr. Horseman's contract expires in September of this year. There was a trigger in the contract in March, which required these discussions, and Mr. Horseman's welcome to have the microphone and make any comments he wants. For my part, I thank him for his service to date. I want to be very clear with everybody. His service to date is not over. We have every expectation that he will work through the remainder of his contract. He will certainly be at the next meeting and the next meeting, so there's no need to go around the horseshoe and do all of the thank yous. We can save that for his last meeting. The purpose of today is to strike a committee to find his replacement. One of the reasons why I would recommend we move on that sooner rather than later is I'd like to start the process and try and go through the process without hiring a consultant. If in the event we do that successfully, I want to have the time to actually then retain a consultant and go through it with a consultant. But I think we owe it to the community to try and save that money. I've been through this process before. I've been through a number of hirings down at the city, and I think hopefully we can do that with this committee and human resources. And if we can't, we will start the process again, and we will use the services of a professional. But obviously, if that comes to pass, we'll be back here and we'll be talking about that. So the point of today is just to make sure that we can appoint a committee and we can constitute that committee and we can start that work. If Mr. Horseman would like anything to say, he's welcome to.
Thank you, through you, Mr. Mayor, to council. It's been a pleasure working with the previous council and with yourselves, and yes, I'm really looking forward to also working with yourselves for the transition. This is just a contractual thing, and really looking forward to continuing in my capacity till someone else comes on board. A particular thing I need to say, and I'll say it again when it is we get closer to the September date, is I've really enjoyed working with staff. We have a tremendous team here in all of the areas, and it's been incredible feedback from staff when I've reached out to them in advance of this, because I didn't want them to see it through a media outlet. I wanted them to be able to see in person, and it's been a great response, and they're great people, and they're really conscientious, dedicated employees, and I look forward to working with them too over the next 6 months as we go through this transition. So thank you for letting me have some comments.
Okay, so council, I've had, if there are any questions on the report, we're happy to answer them. I've had 3 councillors indicate interest in serving the committee: Councillor Nero, Councillor Hilsinger, and Councillor Shoemaker. If all 3 are still interested in serving the committee, we'll have to have a vote, and then we'll you know how it works. You have 2 votes, and we'll go through that process. So just to confirm, Councillor Nero, Councillor Hilsinger, and Councillor Shoemaker, you're all interested in sitting on the committee?
Yes.
Okay. So, Mr. Clerk?
Council, you do have pads of paper in front of you. Would you please vote for 2 of the 3 names and put your name at the top of the sheet? I'll collect them and then read out the votes. Mr. Mayor, I'll ask you to keep track.
I'm keeping track,
The CAO?
Yeah, I don't see Rachel here, so I got my pen ready.
Councillor Nero votes for Councillor Nero and Councillor Hilsinger. Councillor Christian votes for Councillor Shoemaker and Councillor Nero. Councillor Dufour votes for Councillor Nero and Councillor Hilsinger. Councillor Hilsinger votes for Councillor Hilsinger and Councillor Nero. Councillor Scott votes for Councillor Shoemaker and Councillor Hilsinger. Councillor Vezo-Allen votes for Councillor Hilsinger and Councillor Nero. Councillor Gardy votes for Councillor Nero and Councillor Hilsinger. Councillor Hollingsworth votes for Councillor Nero and Councillor Hilsinger. Councillor Shoemaker votes for Councillor Shoemaker and Councillor Hilsinger. Councillor Bruni votes for Councillor Nero and Councillor Shoemaker. And Mayor Provenzano votes for Councillor Nero and Councillor Hilsinger.
So it's 9 votes for Councillor Nero, 9 votes for Councillor Hilsinger, 4 votes for Councillor Shoemaker.
Mr. Mayor, members of council, that leaves us with the resolution by Councillors Dufour and Nero. Resolved that council authorize the filling of the CAO vacancy, which will occur at the expiration of the current CAO's contract, and further that council approve a selection committee consisting of the mayor, Councillor Nero, and Councillor Hilsinger.
All in favor? Carried.
And your electronic voting should be before you. And it's glitched, so.
Did you get it though, Councillor? Councillor Christian got it this time. Who didn't get it? Can you show me hands? Okay. Okay, well, we'll get this ready for next meeting.
Council, that brings us to the bylaws section of the meeting. There was a conflict of Councillor Shoemaker's on bylaw 11.15. That bylaw is resolved that bylaw 2019-30 being a bylaw to assume for public use in established public streets, various parcels of land conveyed to the city be passed in open council this 20th day of January 2019.
All in favor? Carried.
Council, I apologize. I'm looking at the wrong meeting. And I will get back to this meeting. The bylaw is a resolution by councilors Dufour and Bruni resolved the bylaw 2019-35 being a bylaw to amend Sault Ste. Marie zoning bylaws 2005-150 and 2005-151 concerning lands located at 747 Great Northern Road be passed in open council this 11th day of February 2019.
All in favor? Carried.
And you should all be live on your voting.
How will that deal with Council Shoemaker?
It won't. Let's see, it's crossed them out.
That's neat.
And that brings us to our overall bylaws. A motion by councilors Dufour and Bruni. Resolved that all bylaws under item 11 of the agenda under date 2019-02 11 be approved, save and accept bylaw 2019-35.
All in favor? Carried.
Council, we have one item or two items in closed session. I've got a resolution that doesn't show up, so we won't be voting electronically. So it's resolved that council now proceed into closed session to discuss one labor relations item and one item concerning the privacy of an identifiable individual. And further be it resolved that should said closed meeting be adjourned, that council may reconvene in closed session to continue to discuss the same matter without the need for a further authorizing resolution.
All in favor? Carried.
And a motion by councilors Vezo, Allen, Nero, resolved that this council shall now adjourn.
All in favor? Carried.